I'm Tim Ventura, and in this presentation, Dr. Eamonn Ansbro discusses modeling of UAP orbital tracks, leading to the hypothesis that Earth is under controlled autonomous surveillance by UAP, which he believes communicate with each other using faster-than-light quantum signaling to overcome communications delays in interstellar travel. Dr. Ansbro's team has constructed an experimental quantum superluminal communication system, and he will discuss the development and testing of this system, as well as opportunities for developing communications protocols and methodologies for first contact. Dr. Ansbro has a Master's of Science, Master's of Philosophy, and PhD in Astronomy, and is a member of a number of prominent UFO and UAP organizations, including the Scientific Coalition for Unidentified Aerospace Phenomena, SETI, the International Aeronautical Federation, and the Royal Astronomical Society.
Okay, well, you've certainly outlined a number of organizations that I'm involved with, I'm going to go into this in some detail, but I don't want to go into too much technical side of this because it'll take so long to explain a lot of things in this. So I'm going through concepts behind a lot of the research that's been done, and but there's a lot of published papers that I can send on to people if they're interested. So I'll start off straight off. Okay, in order to deal with the UAP area, or UFOs as it used to be called, you need to be dealing with a larger reality. And there are indeed patterns to UFOs, and there's even a theory regarding this as well. And I've been heavily involved in that back in the 1990s. I also looked into interstellar travel routes, that is to do with 3D modeling back nearly 30 years ago. And I've looked into the whole interdimensional constructs behind UFOs. And then leading on to instrumented UFO research, there has been a history of that with other organizations. And then leading into the communications with an extraterrestrial intelligence. And this is only a hypothesis, mind you. And then going into the communications technology. And then there's another key element that's important in the larger reality when you're dealing with communications, and that is co-creative science. And I'll just go into that briefly in the talk, and then lead into first contact and then post-contact protocols. So you need to amass a lot of information before you can deal with contact. And it's rather like an anthropologist, meeting a new tribe at a distance, and you need to study the tribe, its behavior, and so forth. So similarly, that's the approach I took way back in the 90s and going into the 2000s, that UAP may be an interdimensional constructs, and the characteristics behind it, the physics, dynamics, intelligence, and then the patterns around the Earth, if any at all, and interstellar travel routes, which they may be taking out. We're only dealing with maybe one category within the Kardashev classification of civilizations here. And because I'm pretty convinced, actually, we're dealing with an awful lot of, how shall I put it, non-human intelligence, ETI, and maybe other types of intelligences as well. So it's a really complex area to deal with. So I think just to narrow things down, we can look into the biological and sociological side of things, AI characteristics, then onto the communications, and then hopefully first contact. So the actual theory, which I'll go into later on, was worked out during the 1990s. I worked with another colleague on this, and we made some discoveries from it. And this was based on an enormous amount of data from the UK, France, and also the United States. This would be computerized data, which provided about 20,000 reports altogether. So, but I'm just taking Ireland as an example out of 8 countries that we've tested the hypothesis regarding the patterns behind UFOs, the UAP. And then I'll go into proposed global contact, how it could be done. And this is where the technology would come in. So I started in this around 1990, carried out 150 UFO cases, researched. So it gave me a flavor of what we were dealing with. I have a background in my very early years in meteorology, atmospheric physics, also into optical engineering, electro-optics, as well as astronomy. And by 95, discovered that there are indeed UFO patterns on a global basis. It's not just in, particular geographical areas, it's worldwide. And then this led into, in 2000, instrumental UFO research. And then from 1995 to the present, to try and understand the whole contact arena between UFOs, UAP, ETI, NHI. And then leading into communications initiative, how it could be done. And then that could actually be achieved possibly through global communications as well. So it needs to be democratized. It can't be from governments, because I'll explain this later on. It's not my bias. It's more, how shall I put it? There's other factors in there which could prevent or block any communications if there are other agendas, from other parties. So this is, I'm arguing that this is a hypothesis for the UAP NHI, that it's extraterrestrial, that we're dealing with exogenous probes, and we may be dealing with the first detection of the technosignatures of ETI that's monitoring the Earth. There is a book, actually, academic book coming out in February 2022, which goes into some detail regarding the communications with ETI behind the UAP. So it's very much forward thinking, actually, this. Based on that hypothesis, some of you might have heard about the zoo hypothesis within SETI. That's the monitoring of the Earth by an ETC. But there is modifications to that, the laboratory hypothesis, where it's suggesting that we ought to do scientific research based on what we're extracting from information dealing with the physics behind UAP, its patterns, behavior, etc., etc. And then possibly the actual from that, if we can achieve a relationship then on a global basis with an ETI, a UAP, so to speak. I think most people know what a UFO UAP is, but I put it in there actually as the definition behind it. Well, I won't labor on it too much, but the whole UAP area has been observed with characteristics, has been documented for at least 110 years. So it didn't actually start in December 2017. And that's according to one report, NARCAP, which is in the US, dealing with pilot reports as an example of this. There are a number of other reports in other countries which also back up what NARCAP has in their reports. So as I was saying, that I'm hypothesizing that we're dealing with an extraterrestrial intelligence here. And what was one inspiring scientist was Professor James McDonald back in 1968. He was the principal scientist that made that statement to the House Committee on Science and Astronautics, that we're probably dealing with extraterrestrial devices engaged in something that might be very tentatively be termed surveillance. So James McDonald has been an inspiration to some individual scientists. And from that, one could look into, are there patterns to this? In other words, trying to prove the hypothesis that there could be a surveillance going on. So there are other projects. Some of you would be familiar with the Galileo Project, which is really an astrophysical project that was initiated there back 3 or 4 months ago by Harvard Astronomy Center for Astrophysics. And although it's quite a worthwhile and respectful approach to it, but it's only one sort of frame or approach, which is only astrophysical. We're not dealing with a larger reality here where you need to deal with it. It's as if, how shall I put it, consciousness has been taken out of the equation since Galileo. so to speak, in the last 400 years. So you need to bring in metaphysics when you're dealing with the UAP. If you're not, it's really going to be problematic when it comes to communications. There are other groups, which I'm also a member of, SKU, which does studies of the UAP. That started a few years ago. They've done some excellent work in that area, come out with published papers and so forth. And then there's also recently, it was launched in May of this year, the International Coalition for Extraterrestrial Research. And this is sort of the creme de la creme of, how should I put it, UFO researchers that, are scientists, academics, and so forth from nearly 30 countries. And this is an INGO, and that was purposely established because the aim actually is to lead to the United Nations for this. There are discussions going on with one sovereign state to see if they would support ICER in its mission. So just going back to the scientific research again, the nature and dynamics of the UAPs. What has been discovered that, if you really go into the depths of research in the whole UFO area, and particularly dealing with the electromagnetic spectrum, that it seems to be problematic that they're not using the electromagnetic spectrum in the strict sense as a radiation. And I won't go into all the detail here of that, that could be for another time, but very much into the quantum mechanics side of things for possibly, I think, for transferring information to a UAP that would be able to receive it. So I'm not going to labor on anything to do with the velocities and rates of acceleration. A lot of this has been done by others, but I'll be going into a lot more detail as to how I think they may be traveling, certainly from an interstellar point of view. So there has been work actually by others, certainly in China, dealing with the superluminal phenomena within quantum communications. So it's very much a realistic situation. And it's interesting the Chinese are working on this. They've actually been working on this for, well, roughly about 20 years. Not so much known in the West. Difficult to get a lot of the papers because they're all in Chinese. But I think they're ahead of everybody actually on this one. And I'll be going into a bit more detail about what we're doing in Europe regarding what we call quantum superluminal communications. So when it comes to communications with others, it really doesn't make sense if you're traveling, say, from an interstellar point of view, and say you're starting off from your star system, going to another star system that's 50 light years away, and then you're communicating back to your the headquarters, so to speak. It's going to take 50 years to send that form of communication. So it's really futile, I think, how one would be applying, say, older technologies where you're using the electromagnetic spectrum. So you'd have to use something else. And so I'm suggesting that quantum superluminal communication is really the way to go. And I'll go into a little bit more detail on that. Now, just on the UFOs and patterns research, historically, there has been work done back in the late 50s by Eamonn Ansbro in France, and that was based on the 1954 UFO events in France, which suggested that there could be a pattern to it. And he came up with a theory called the straight line theory, but later on it was discovered that it just didn't work. There was no correlation at all. Bruce Cathey, 1965, also worked on possible pattern as well, and he came up with the world grid, came out with a number of books on that. It looks feasible, some of it. It was unfortunate it never expanded any further from that. And then during the 90s, I worked with another gentleman, Dutton, and so we made a breakthrough discovery, which was based on not just the 150 Irish reports, but also 15,000 global reports. And in order to have something that's reliable when you're observing a UFO, you really need multiply witnessed and good timing. So from that, the best was extracted from the 15,000, and that was 1,300 reliable reports for the model to possibly work. But we had worked with this with a lot of failures in it, but in the end, there's a definite pattern to it, which suggests, and it would back up what James McDonald said way back in 1968, that we do have a surveillance going on. It's not any old random surveillance. There is a controlled autonomous surveillance. There's a number of papers that were published by myself and others. And if anybody's interested, I can, if they can contact by email, I can send them on some of these papers. But some of these publications even go back to 1992. So it's it's like there's nothing. How should I put it? It's not like we've started in 2017. A lot of us independent researchers, you could say it's rather like an invisible college. I've been working in this field for a long time. And anyway, just on jumping into the patterns in Ireland as an example out of a number of countries. In case any of you are not too sure where Ireland is in Europe, and it's on the most westerly region of Europe. It's a small island, population 5 million. And there's, like many other countries, it also has its UFO sightings and so forth. And so just focusing on one region in particular, back in 1991, where there was a lot of UFO activity. And in fact, I started researching this in my spare time. And in fact, the activity seemed to be clustered in one small area. And from that area, they looked into the whole possible cycles and patterns behind it. And I actually came out with a publication in '92, which suggested that there was a pattern to it. And then much later on, we got working with another gentleman that we were able to not only work out the model for this, but even to provide windows of opportunity when events may occur at specific locations at specific times. So this is the kind of stuff that we had to deal with, and it would be familiar to anybody dealing with the UFO area, UFO research. So yes, we came across the typical close encounters of the first, second, and third kind, and even the fourth kind as well. And you have to include MIBs in that as well, MIBS. These would be very good cases, and they were within plus or minus 20 minutes for the theory to work. In fact, we got an 80% hit that it was correlating really well with it. But we have lots of these charts from different countries, which shows similar correlations. So the theory itself demonstrates that we have, as I mentioned, a controlled surveillance of the Earth by, it could be one group or a number of groups, not too sure. Don't even know what the Kardashev type could be. It could be at least 1 to 1.5. Those are familiar with the Kardashev classification for civilizations. And how it works is that this would be different to artificial satellites now that would have specific orbital trajectories around the Earth. What we're dealing with here is orbital tracks that are synchronized with the rotation of the Earth. So you heard it, they're synchronized with the rotation of the Earth, very unusual. So the discovery of about 660 altogether, and huge amount of them intersect at specific locations where previous historical events had occurred, and even future events were also occurring at those locations as well, which we will show you as we go along. So the tracks that what usually happens is that you'd have now again, this is all hypothetical. You'd have say a super type craft that would be in the upper stratosphere, on one of these orbital tracks, and this would eject a number of probes. It could be the one probe or a number of probes, and this is typically what people would be seeing at low altitude. And the drop is very fast, and I think the Tic Tac is a good example of that. But it doesn't necessarily mean the whole Tic Tac, the 1984 UFOs would be similar to these. It could be a different category altogether. So the probes would operate within plus or minus 5 kilometers of the actual track, and they'd be around maybe for a number of minutes. And then on another track, we think that would also have the same type of craft at a high altitude in the upper stratosphere. These will be retrieved. So it's rather like the whole Apollo mission, the sort of similarities to it. But there is a paper actually regarding this that came out in 2001 with SETI. So if we just take one particular region, and this is in the southwest of Ireland, and you can see actually from the blue dots where the UFOs were witnessed, that you have tracks actually, quite a density of tracks running through, and yet it's fairly vacant in other parts of the country. So these tracks can be numbered and worked out to find out when events may occur again. So we have computerized data to show, I'm not too sure if I can show this with my pointer, but wherever there's a straight line with a curved line is where the intersection would take place. In other words, the intersection for future events. So these are, this is computerized graphs, which provides windows of opportunity when events may take place at that specific location. And you know, it could be within plus or minus half an hour the event has occurred. We have been successful actually back in the mid-90s of recording. In fact, we've had British television over for this, and they managed to get a recording of one of these based on the scientific work we were doing. And we've done this before on a number of occasions, and not just in Ireland, but also in other countries. A lot of the stuff you wouldn't hear about because how shall I put it? We don't have editorial discretion when it comes to the media regarding this, but we were suppressed actually with a lot of this information. So if we go to another part of Ireland in the northwest, which I thought was an absolute fantastic laboratory for this. And this is an area it's in Boyle, County Roscommon. This is a lake called Lough Key, and this is where a huge amount of events have been taking place, even historically. And again, actually, when we looked at the model and then looked at the witnessed observations of the UFOs, it was fitting the tracks beautifully. So then we were in a position to use the computerized graphs to see if we could have any future events that we might be able to record. So this is the lake, or the loch as we call it in Ireland, and some of the sightings from 96 to 2015. And this is not only we've got a recording of this, but unfortunately, we how shall I put it? As an example, that we'll call it the cylindrical type craft. I mean, there's also been your typical flying saucer, even has been witnessed as well. But we actually did get one recording of this back in December 13th, 1997, and this was shown on national television here in Ireland. But unfortunately, this is what we really were after, because there was 3 witnesses to this close up within 100 meters, and the 3 persons actually that were witnessing this, they had binoculars and they got close-ups and detail of the superstructure of the craft itself. And that was very helpful from the point of view of the physics behind the craft. So we've actually done quite a bit of work in that area as to the propulsion system, so to speak, how it's operating. We've also discovered a portal. This is an artificial representation of a portal. And through, we suspected there might be a portal that the craft might be using. This would be the interdimensional side of things, where they manifest themselves or, disappear. And so we took multiple images around the lake, and we discovered, actually, with a gap of in time of 6 months, we actually got images of an area that showed this like white glow, and this is in the daytime now. And so we suspected actually that that this may be the portal. And is there any correlation with the model that we were dealing with? So I'm not saying there is any correlation, but it's certainly very close of what we're dealing with here. And as you can see, the where this craft was witnessed back in October 98, that it disappeared in this general region here. But the witnesses couldn't see further beyond this region here. So it was very difficult actually to know, to pinpoint where it disappeared. But at least it gives you a flavor that this particular event occurred based on the theory itself. So UFOs are rare, but the frequency at Lockheed is quite high, and there may be a number of reasons. One is the discovery of an interdimensional portal at a specific location, and the discovery of a number of intersecting orbital tracks. And this provides opportunities for witnessing future events. Other interesting areas around the country, we discovered that if the extraterrestrial intelligence is using, well, these tracks, which we think they are, we discovered that there were shared tracks. Now, the shared tracks means that you're dealing with events that are synchronized at those specific locations. So it's not just in Lockheed up in here in the northwest, but also in Dublin in the east, and also Bantry. And so some weeks before these possible events might occur, we were actually successful in getting recordings at Lockheed, and also was witnessed in Dublin and also witnessed in Bantry. So we actually confirmed that the craft were using shared tracks. So as it's like everything else in science, you've got to build up on, say once you've made one discovery, you want to see, well, would this work for the next experiment, so to speak. So then on a much larger scale, through a network of other people that are interested in the whole UFO area, and our network was stretching from the UK, France, and Italy. And so we had a window of opportunity when an event occurred in Boyle back in 1999. And the same construct was seen I think it was about 30 minutes later in northern part of Italy, and this was multiply witnessed. So it was actually confirming that the same construct. Now, we had to make that announcement, by the way, to those that were interested in this in different countries. And so we got a confirmation that even over the distance of 1,200 miles, it had a speed of Mach 30. So this is, it was tested out in other countries, in Italy, Norway. There is a paper actually which has details about the Norwegian sightings. You may have heard of Project Hesteland. And it's not just the balls of light with Hesteland. There have been craft as well that have been seen but not recorded. Even though scientists had been there from joint missions with Italian scientists and Norwegian scientists, and they've had triangular craft appearing. But, unfortunately, science doesn't allow things like that, not in those days. So that had to be left out of the equation in any published material. which is unfortunate. But also, we've had triangular craft in Ireland as well, actually to the east of Boyle, and we've actually got film footage of that. And we've even got the craft actually doing an interesting, actually, but it looks like a laser beam shot out of one of the apex of the craft itself. But that was only discovered through slowing down the film footage. So just jumping into where they're coming from, you know, if they have reached our solar system, are they coming from other planets, from other galaxies? These are just questions here. It's not that we're trying to answer them. They're coming from other dimensions. Are they using, you know, wormholes, zero-point energy, quantum tunneling, teleportation? So if we go on to, okay, again, I won't labor on this here. This is to do with 3D modeling of the most likely routes that interstellar travelers would be coming to, say, our solar system. And I'm actually going to rush through this because I don't want to get too bogged down in it. But just to say to you that we did discover that one of the stars, that's the Eta Cassiopeia, does show up on two of the routes coming to our own solar system. But what's interesting we found was that there doesn't, you know, if you were, say, trading, it seems our solar system is not the obvious place to come to for trading. We seem to be bypassed, you know, so that's what's actually showing here if you were to, you know, put that sort of point of view over, you know, why would you be coming to our solar system? But it doesn't actually show up here. Anyway, as I mentioned earlier on about travel and communications via other dimensions through linear space. As I was saying before, that I think actually they're traveling using faster than light methods, and the communications not within the EM spectrum, and that we've seen, and I think they're using the quantum universe, which you're into quantum mechanics, you're into consciousness, like a conscious universe situation you're going into. So ETI, if they're using FTL, most likely they're using QSE. Again, it's all a hypothesis at this stage. In order to achieve something like this, that the actual ETs themselves would have to be consciously resonating with the craft if they want to achieve hyperspace to get to another stellar system. For human beings, we actually do have that information within us, but unfortunately, the way that we've evolved, certainly in society in the last thousands of years, it's not showing these dormant qualities that we actually do have there, like, for example, telepathy. So those of you who have researched UFOs, they go through different colors. These would be like resonances. I'm just taking an example here of a craft, say it was, this is just a representation now of a craft, say, rising above our planet and then going through a sequence of colors. So these would be different resonances, different frequencies. So the craft actually probably with the longest period of time would be actually to reach the speed of light first before you go into hyperspace. Hyperspace is where you have non-time. And then it could be an incredible short time in hyperspace. It could be a second or something. And then coming in and then flipping into our own space-time to go to, you know, its stellar system. So you could be 300 light years away, and it may only take 2 or 3 hours to get to that particular stellar system through this mode of travel, so to speak. This is just a representation of it. So as I mentioned there, you'd have to accelerate to the speed of light. That'd be the longest period. And then you flip into hyperspace and then flip out, decelerate to the star system that you're trying to get to. So this is within our space-time as physical beings. Now, going on to instrumented UFO research, there's been quite a history behind this. Project Starlight International, 1976, Ray Stanford initiated this. And they actually made an interesting discovery, and that the UFOs were operating in the infrared. So that was a very useful component. Project Identification, 1980, US, in, I think it was University of Missouri, by a physicist called Rutledge, and they discovered that there was a consciousness connection behind it. And this was funded by the physics department. Now, they didn't expect the consciousness bit to come into it. It was just a spin-off, but it was very useful information. And they came out with a very good publication called, well, it's actually a book called Project Identification that was published. Project Hestelon, some of you may have heard of it, started in '84 by Erland Strand in Norway. And that was based on the enormous amount of lights that were seen in a particular location called Hestelon, which is in the middle of Norway. And during the late 90s into the 2000s, there's been a number of missions to not only apply more sophisticated detection systems in different bands, like not just radar and the visible, but also the infrared as well, and infrasound. So it's actually nothing new. You know, when you look at the Galileo project, you know, with all due respect, you know, that it's, you know, a lot of this work has been going on behind the scenes for quite a long time. And there's some very good publications came out of Hestelon. And SETI Kingland was set up in 2000, and this was established near Lock Key, where all the UFO activity was happening. Sort of very similar to Hestelon, you know, so you set up your detection systems at Hestelon because that's where all the activity is. I think with Project Galileo Project, there's a similar situation. They're going to use fairly sophisticated equipment, telescopes, I understand, and then locating them at specific locations around the Earth where there'll be a lot more or high amount of activity. Again, these are all astrophysical approaches, or this instrumented UFO research that we have here. So we're trying to get data, new information about the structure of UFOs, discovering new aspects of the physics, and what we're discovering that there's a much wider range of the reality that's required for us to understand not just the physics, but going into new physics as well. The energy field surrounding UFOs, spectral determination for the composition of UFOs, that's quite a challenging area, because you're dealing with a random movement with an object, where trying to get a spectra of something like this through a slit is nearly impossible. But there are ways actually to address that issue. There's a couple of papers in that area that are there if anybody's interested. This was the setup back in 2001, which involved 11 cameras, all sky cameras, special sensors at the time, with the appropriate lenses that covered the whole sky. And so the whole sky was broken up into thousands of little squares. And the reason for that is that UFOs can just manifest themselves. This is where the interdimensional side comes into it. Or you might see a linear movement of one of them across the sky, zigzag movements and so forth. And of course, the ideal thing would be to have something that's really just stationary or even very slow, but it's a large construct to make the recording. So this had been operating for a good few years, and we've got quite a lot of data in this area, which was published in a number of books. Unfortunately, papers that were submitted were rejected in this area. So it was understandable at the time, but some of this material is still around. There were two tracking platforms we developed, which linked into the all-sky camera system. So if the all-sky camera system picked up a UFO, then this would trigger these two tracking platforms that had both visible and infrared, and also a gamma ray detector as well, because we discovered that in encounters, some people have had ultraviolet radiation burns. So decided back nearly 20 years ago to apply a gamma ray detector in this. We've tried different, because it's been so challenging to get spectra, we came up with a new type of a slitless spectrograph based on another scientist. Actually, I was involved with UFOdata.org in the US, and one of the guys there had have developed a special spectrograph that could be used for UFOs because of that such a wide field of view, and the resolution was pretty good as well. But that's just some of the team that you see there. Also, very recently, and I was probably spurred on by Avi Loeb at Harvard with the Galileo Project, is to use one of our telescopes. So we have just developing a suite of robotic telescopes in southern Spain. And one of these could be used actually for detecting UFOs. So what's needed is a breakthrough technology within this whole quantum area. And even based on the estimated number of ET civilizations that could be there, and that's based, of course, on the number of exoplanets discovered within 3,000 light years of our own solar system. And of course, our own galaxy has a major axis of 100,000 light years across. And, you know, there could be tens of thousands of civilizations out there. So if we sort of narrow it down to the biological and sociological theories, some of the schools of thought would show that in biology at a much more advanced level, you'd have co-evolution. In other words, a lot of cooperation with entities, individuals, and so forth. And then sociologically, cooperation for civilization, that would only come about if there was an understanding by an ETC of their planetary affairs. If you take our own civilization based on Kardashev 0.7, we're nowhere near that at all. We're not aligned to the planet. There seems to be a complete disconnect from that. So any advanced civilizations in their evolution would have cooperated within their system in order to, in other words, you'd have less violence, but more of a cohesion to expand out from their star system. And I think this could be actually what's happening here. So you'd need new communications technologies, which it may be a common feature characteristics with ET civilizations, using the quantum universe, using consciousness and so forth, using quantum mechanics. So it does have potential benefits. Again, we'd have to go into the signal interpretation, the response strategy. So the whole protocols in SETI would have to be completely revised. SETI is very much heavy into the whole radio SETI area. I don't believe myself that communication will take place by an ETC using the EM spectrum. But that's my own opinion, although I'm actually in the SETI fraternity. But so I'll jump a little bit past these and just say that we're researching this out where we're developing a prototype. We're in the precursor state before the QSC type system. And Dr. Hugh Deasy and myself, we work for Space Exploration Limited. We have support by the European Space Agency, Space Solutions, and also Munster Technological University and Enterprise Ireland, which is a government body. So we do have credibility of what we're trying to do, because we see it as the future of communications in space. And particularly as we go out, not just going to the moon, which there's a 3.5 second delay in time, but I'm talking about Mars, which even on conjunction with the Earth is 15 minutes in time. So one has to think of the future in that sense. And also if someone has a breakthrough to do with interstellar travel, this would be the most likely type of method of communications to use. So again, it's a very early days, actually. We think it's some sort of near field like energy radiation we're dealing with, not not so much longitudinal waves and scalar waves. That's that's really a weak area dealing with this. But there's obviously quite a difference from transverse waves, the sinusoidal waves you have in the electromagnetic spectrum. So we think actually this is this may be what could be used actually for the communication. So this would be, not saying it's a new radiation, it's just that it's not one that's talked about in the classical scientific sense, so to speak. So we actually looked into this and we tried to develop some of the technology for this. And it would mean actually that the operator for the communication system, I mean, this is like actually, it's quite a departure from how we're actually put it, operators for television, sorry, I say operators for radar, operators, whatever. There's a connection, all right, from the physical and mind sense, but in this you'd have to be resonating. This is where the quantum mechanics comes into it. As I said, it's pretty early days yet doing this kind of stuff, but you really have to have an understanding of consciousness. And I think we'd have to eventually learn actually to develop consciousness, and if we're going to tap into a wide spectrum of reality. And but there are humans and ETs have nonlinear concepts there, and that is to do with consciousness. That's the common feature that we have from both parties, so to speak. If we're successful with the QSC, then you're dealing with instant communications here. It doesn't matter what the distance is. So you're not constrained by 3,000 light years away. You can go 100,000 light years away. And I mean, if you were to use radio waves actually start deteriorating as you go out from the Earth. And I suspect that, even up to 3,000-4,000 light years, they would deteriorate completely. So it's not that form of signal one would be used for communication. It'd have to be something like this to achieve. So you're dealing with instant communications. It's in real time. And the exciting part about it is that it's not, you don't actually have to operate it in our space-time as such, that it may actually work in other multiverses as well. So if we take other multiverses, other universes that would have its reality, or maybe it's other realities, they would also have, or it would have other dimensions there as well. So the theory goes that we think actually one would have to consciously resonate with the machine, we'll put it that way. You can, what I've depicted there to do with scalar waves is not really the approach. It's probably the near field approach. So this was sort of early way of thinking how it could be done for two-way communications with another consciousness out there. So the QSC you could actually eavesdrop. It would be if we work the technology to a degree where we could actually eavesdrop on communications out there with, say, extraterrestrials. And this is just a depiction of it here. And then we have the two-way communications as a possibility. But it's not an easy one. There's other disciplines one would have to apply here. And I mentioned much earlier on about metaphysics. So, the whole transformation of culture sort of got rid of metaphysics back in, what was it, the 1830s. And then we're left with a mechanistic world in science and medicine and so forth. So you have to bring in the metaphysics side of it. So what I mean by that is the experiential side of it. So you have to be not the normal contemporary scientist, which is disconnected from nature intelligence itself, but you need to be a co-creative scientist. So you need to set up that partnership with nature intelligence itself as the tool for the communications to take place. So here's just giving you a pictorial actually how this may work. So the operator would link in with nature intelligence. There's nothing new about this. It's just there are people out there that do this type of thing. but may not be in an efficient way, so to speak. This would be a scientific, efficient way of using this tool as part of the communications to take place with eventually extraterrestrial intelligence. I suspect actually that the ETI area is already using the quantum universe, using nature intelligence already there for its operations, has a huge understanding of that area. And it's an area that we really need to explore further. So as I was saying about, setting up the intention through this co-creative scientific approach. So you're setting up a partnership with nature intelligence. You're setting up a definition, a direction and purpose behind this for this to work. I've worked with Professor John Elliott, who deals with, this is to do with language interpretation. He's probably the #1 in the world actually dealing with this. He's now has just taken the initiative of setting up the SETI post-detection hub, which will be announced early next year, which I'm involved with. But that's dealing with, it's like you're dealing with a different radiation here, dealing with the quantum universe, where the electromagnetic spectrum is, I feel, heavily constrained for any communication to take place. So if we do get a signal in, it's down to the interpretation, working out the socio-cultural side of it, the language interpretation. This is actually not my area at all. This will be more of John Elliott and Klara Kabova from the Czech Republic, who specialize in these areas. So the signal comes in, you have to denoise the signal and analyze it, or interpret it. Again, this is just a representation here, but this may not be the case. As I said, it's very early days in trying to, I say we're in the middle of an experimental model at the moment, which is the precursor to the QSC. So you could have that signal coming in from ETI, don't know what it is, but you want to be given enough time to, once you've got the signal, you want to send it back to them, because it gives enough time actually to work out, what the signal could be. I mean, we don't even have a Rosetta Stone for something like this. I'll leave this one out because that's, that's just one interpretation of what could happen. I think the exciting bit about the quantum communications is that it addresses all the timescale situation, that it's in real time. You can do it now. It's not a situation where SETI radio side where you're showing that we exist announcements, and then you have to send another signal back 20, 30, 100 light years to get another signal back or something, So it just doesn't make sense. As I said, in my own opinion, that this is the approach. I think we need to be going into expand into the whole quantum universe and applying tools in that area. Interesting enough, SETI permanent committee of the International Aeronautical Fdederation is actually the only agency to inform the United Nations of first contact. So it's I'm smiling because I think it's very unlikely that the communication will take place using the tools that they have at the moment. There's a good chance they may pick up techno signatures, but that doesn't mean it's first contact. That's just some sort of artificial techno signature. But I don't think you would apply that as for first contact. It's just that it's detection of something that is not from our civilization. So it would require, well, the existing protocols that they have in SETI would have to completely upgrade it for a QSC type of approach. And so it would mean, a completely new preparation for mankind, because you're dealing with real-time communications here. I mean, if we were to succeed in the QSC, you'd need to distribute these to nodal points around the Earth and have the right communication operatives that have to be trained in to specific expertise in different fields to take place. So I'll just quickly go through this. I don't know how much time I've got left, but oh my God, I can see I'm out of time. But the number of areas, the sensitization, preparation, first contact. I mean, a lot of this is already known through the media about the whole extraterrestrial area and even in the scientific field. So I won't labor on any of this stuff. The raising awareness, which has already been done to a certain, I think has been certainly highlighted in the last 2 or 3, 4 years, even more so. And then phase 3 would be the first contact to publicly inform the existence of contact, from science. Now, actually, I have this list here, which is very much a SETI approach, for their protocols. That would have to be completely changed for what I'm thinking here. And of course, the new era would be, we've becoming a new member of the cosmic community, and setting up intercultural and scientific exchange with them. So before first contact, you'd have to do preparations. And then after contact, you'd have to find out what the ETC contact is, what classification there would be, and so forth, what their agenda is. But that would be all down to language interpretation. That's a real complex area. So taking phase 2 and 3, you want to find out who they are, where they come from, why they're in communications. Now, one is not being aggressive here, and actually I'll show how this can be well balanced out if one is to achieve the communications. So I would say it on a 24/7 basis. So it's completely democratized. In other words, there's no nations involved in this, no governments involved in this, military or anything like that. They would have their agendas, of course, but that's not what this is about. This is to do with the whole planet and the 7.5 billion people that are involved in it. So you'd set up communication centers, and you train the communication operatives for this. Ethics would be a key factor in this, to do with harmony and peace regarding all this, and in order to establish our communication with an ET civilization, and that's all for the benefit of mankind. So training communication operatives. So it's an intention-based form of communication. Because you're dealing with resonance, where it brings in emotions and so forth, it's rather like training a completely new type of pilots, air pilots or astronauts. This is a fundamentally different approach to communications. So in order to develop the cooperation with ETs, so harmony and balance will be a key factor for this, and the right attitude, focusing our attention, and then going through a particular 5-step communication, which you can read on the list there. Sorry, I'm going through this fairly fast now because of the time factor. But if you can read some of the material up there, but that's the approach I'm suggesting if we were to achieve QSC, and also to make that breakthrough in the communications with one or a number of ET civilizations. Doesn't necessarily have to be in the UAP area, which you could say one category could be an ET civilization, but I think we're dealing with 3 different categories around the Earth. I think we already have UAP or UFOs that have been residing here for a long time, historically. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that. And then you have probably a second category, which could be visitors, like they're coming and going. You have different types of constructs of all different shapes and sizes. And then the third category could be more recent type of visitors, you could say. And I suggest actually is possibly the Tic Tac arena. In other words, the stuff that has been recorded and seen in the last 20 years. And if it's extraterrestrial, it's suggesting that they really want to be seen. And that has really come through in all the material that's come out in the last 3 or 4 years by the US military. So it could well be a third category that's unknown. There's total confusion by not just the US government, but many other governments regarding the more recent activities of the UAP. And so anyway, that's for another day. But anyway, you need to have experts in different fields, from, you name it, from physics to biology to artists, poets, you know, so it's a wide range of people to be trained in as communication operatives. So it's not necessarily biased towards a SETI approach where it's all technology and you're dealing with technicians and nothing else. You really, for this, you need a wide range of expertise. So first contact possible scenario could be this. I'm not going to all the details here, but it could lead well into questions where we're getting answers that would be very exciting for us. But it would lead in for us to be as part of the cosmic community. In other words, we've made it. It's rather like Carl Sagan way back, I think, when he mentioned back in the 80s that it's, you know, dialing into this cosmic community, you know, how do we do it? You know, this could be one way of doing it. So could it be announced to the to the UN? Well, it could be through this approach. Yeah, I mean, QSC is a disruptive technology as compared to the SETI approach. So, and it may not be the SETI Permanent Committee of the IEF. They may not accept this how shall I put it, this new radiation that one is dealing with, you know, the quantum side of things, and may not be acceptable. Well, you know, it's you know, it's like the whole UAP area, you know, scientists need to wake up to that. It's been around a long time. But that mass psychosis in science has been there a long time. You know, it's like you know, a significant amount of scientists have, I think, hypnotized. So even if you show them the evidence, you know, physically, they hear it, they see it about the UAP, even going back some years ago, they can't hear it or see it. It's a type of with the human being, the mind has, how shall I put it, it's flipped into this hypnotic state that it can't see the reality, can't integrate the reality like that. I mean, I've suggested back in the past that, you know, some scientists ought to take psilocybin, you know, to wake up and see the inner space, what's going on, and that might give them some hope, you know, of outer space, you know. But I'll finish at that.